Welcome to the Love That For You podcast, where every week you're invited to dream big, laugh often, and celebrate the extraordinary stories of those who inspire. Your story matters, and I love that for you. This podcast episode is sponsored by Turnkey Solutions Network. They are a family-owned and operated residential remodeling company serving the Charlotte and surrounding areas. This husband and wife team has years of experience and strive to ensure quality workmanship and customer satisfaction. I personally can attest to this because Daniel and Taylor came into my studio and helped me completely demolish a wall that stood in between two bedrooms and made it one large studio space. They did all of this work in 1 week. If you've seen my studio, it is insane. Taylor is ready to walk you through your project design step by step. From material and paint color selection to tile and cabinetry layout, you are never alone throughout this process. Taylor works closely with the installation crews to make sure your vision comes completely to life. Daniel, her husband, will manage your entire project from beginning to end. From getting materials on site and prepping before demo to installing the last mirror or shelf, you will have a member of their team checking in every step of the way. Turnkey Solutions Network also works with DIYers and other contractors through their retail store where you can source your materials at a competitive price. They carry an exclusive selection of tile and have an expansive collection of flooring and cabinetry options. Turnkey Solutions Network offers free estimates and can turn your dream into reality. Again, I've seen it happen in my own life. They can do it for you too. Give them a call at 704-441-7850 or find them on Facebook at Turnkey Solutions Network. Today on the show, you get to hear an incredibly exciting conversation with my friend Ashley Mangione. Ashley and I met at the Queen City Connect networking group that I actually host once a month. If you live in Charlotte and own a business, please come. You can actually follow our Instagram page, Queen City Connect networking group, and there's more information there. But Ashley and I met at the networking group, and she owns a business called Dynamic Learning Connection. She also is an author and has written several books that are coming out late summer, early fall, helping children, teens, and adults navigate living life with ADHD and learning the proper skills for executive functioning. It is an incredible conversation, and I was completely in my feels the whole time, and it was just awesome to be able to have this conversation with her that was so helpful to me, but I know will be so encouraging and helpful for all of you as well. So I can't wait for you to listen to this episode, hear her wisdom, and just feel hopeful and inspired and encouraged that healing is possible and we're not meant to live alone, and we have the sources we need and the knowledge we need and the people around us who are willing to help, and that's exactly what Ashley does for us in today's episode. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Ashley. I'm so excited to hear. It genuinely was the last 2 weeks. I try to be the type of person who batch records these episodes so that I can just kind of sit back and they're ready to go.
Yeah.
And for the past 2 weeks, I have not been doing that, but I also haven't felt the angst of, Morgan, what are you doing? Who are you recording with? I've had this, honestly, this piece of God will provide the person I need to talk to. And I'm telling you, in the last 2 weeks, God has provided the person that I have needed to talk to. And I'm not saying that that should be my new method of living my life, just passively, but also it's been cool to see it's just worked out. God has just worked it out.
Which isn't that amazing, honestly? Why does that surprise us?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it surprises you.
Yeah.
Why do I act in surprise
Yeah.
when God acts on my behalf?
Right.
And I mean, I'm 52. I'm a seasoned Christian at this point. I'm a mature Christian. Why am I still surprised by that when he connects the dots?
Right.
And yet he connects the dots.
Right.
You know?
And I totally agree. I think that there's no such thing as really a coincidence. I just think that God is in everything. Mm-hmm. And it was so neat because on my birthday, there were a few tangible ways where I saw God show up for me. Like I saw it, like something happened.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a scriptural, spiritual thing that happened. It was just something that happened. And I could have looked at it like, oh, well, that's cool that happened on my birthday.
Yeah.
But I just was like, no, God loves me too much. He knew that would make me really happy. Like, how cool. And it's just, he shows up.
Right. Exactly.
That's just what he does.
Totally. And again, we act in surprise of that. And yet often, at least for me, I become so busy that I forget to pay attention to it.
Right.
And so even for me, I was reminding myself last night, in fact, because I'm currently writing a paper about this, of just calming down a little bit to notice and to be still, which we don't always, at least right now in this season, I don't feel like I have that luxury.
Yeah.
And yet I don't want to be ahead of the Lord. Right. I've tried that before, and it's always a disaster. But sometimes we get ahead of it, or ahead of the Lord, and not even intentionally. Not most of the time, I would say, unintentionally.
Right.
And I don't want to be that way.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, find the moment to really think. Right, Lord, what are you doing here? What do you want me to be doing here?
Right.
And will you bless my efforts?
Yeah.
Not for myself, but really because I believe so much in what I do.
Yeah.
And will you just open the doors and put me where I need to be? Which is a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Because I kind of like to have a plan.
Right.
And I have a plan in some ways. And yet, you know, kind of like what you were saying, like in theory, it's not a great way to wing your life all the time without a plan. But I really want mine to align to his.
Right.
And if not, I want to pump the brakes.
Yes, exactly. I was having this exact conversation with a girlfriend of mine yesterday of the balance between we are called to act. We are called to do things. We are here to live life. Right. God wants us to live life abundantly. But beyond that, I have so many things that have happened in my life that I have wanted to happen, or I try to force happen, or I try to manipulate. And it's like, it never works out when I do that. But then when it just like naturally happens, like that's the very best. So it's like that balance of live life boldly and bravely, but also don't live in fear. Don't live in anxiety. Like do the work, but then trust that the Lord's going to go before you and make happen what you want to happen. I feel like we're like told that too in scripture. Also, I'm going to introduce you in a second, but this is great content. So obviously we're going like we're told in scripture so much of like the Ebenezer stones of remembrance. And I think that as humans, like you said, like we're so easy to forget the good things that have happened.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, where do I need to stack up some stones so that which in 2024 terms could be like, am I journaling about this? Am I writing this down? Like, where can I have a place where when I forget the goodness of God, I can go back and see, oh no, like he has been faithful. Like, look at all of these things. Cause I feel like I'm so forgetful. Like I have to go like look back at pictures and be like, oh, cause people ask me like, what was great about, I just turned 32. And so people were like, what was a highlight of 31? And I'm like, y'all, I don't remember. I don't remember what happened in 31. So I will take out my phone and I'll go through photos from the last year. And I'm like, I did this. I did that. Oh, that was amazing. Oh, I remember that day. That was not good. Like, but I document everything through photos.
Yeah. Same.
Shocking nobody.
Same. Yeah.
So like that is like an Ebenezer stone for me. Like I can go back and be like, oh, that was a really cool event. I'm so glad that I was able to do that.
Right. Well, I think that's amazing to document, and I have plenty of stories about that as well. Yeah. But I do think even at my age, again, you know, just looking back, there are so many situations that I didn't realize the Lord's hand was in them. And it definitely, you know, if I'm being honest, didn't feel like the Lord's hand was in them. And now I see the Lord's hand was in it. Yeah. And a lot of it aligns even in where I'm at today. Yeah. But I think, you know, we don't always pay attention to that or even know that the Lord's going to use it or not going to use it. Yeah. But I think he uses everything. But when you brought up the stones, it reminded me. So during COVID, my husband and I went to Oregon to kind of just go hiking, to be outside.
Beautiful.
Truthfully,
I've never been. I would love to go.
One of the most underrated states in the United States, and we've traveled a ton all over. But I literally chose that because I saw this guy's photos on Facebook, and he and his wife were out hiking, and I thought, okay, well, that's outside. We could go do that. And so we were around Mount Hood, and we had hiked up, and it's kind of gravelly, dusty, what I remember, not the easiest because I think the altitude. But at one point, we literally stopped. I had mentioned before I'd gone through a little bit of a traumatic event, or a big traumatic event. And I was in the process of really just trying to heal my mind and whatever that looked like. And you can't speed that up as much as you want to. But we literally stopped and built our own little altar of rocks. And the two of us looked at each other and went back just on our marriage, not, anything prior to that, and just thought each stone we laid and named out loud, this is what the Lord did in this situation. This is what the Lord did in this situation.
I love
and
that.
Then we took a picture of it, and I don't think I ever posted it. I honestly don't really look at it, but you just reminded me that sometimes we really do need to remind ourselves and acknowledge, to the Lord as well of, okay. And then when I looked at that stack, it was like, again, I hadn't forgotten that the Lord was a part of my life. And again, I know that we can't speed up healing.
Right.
Always. But it was still such a visual reminder of acknowledging who really is our healer.
Right.
And who does need to be in the details. And he's trustworthy. And he is.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Ashley Mangione. How did I do with the last name?
You did very well. Mangione.
Yes. Mangione.
Yeah.
You are here and you are already preaching. So that was fantastic. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
I was like, I've got to cut to a point where I introduce her because we're just going. I went to Iceland in 2015.
On my list.
Oh, girl. Okay, take me with you. I'd love to go back. And there are so many places like on the black sand beaches and like all the places we went, there were stones stacked up. Like that's like a thing. Like people will just go stack stones. And that was probably the first time that I had actually seen that visual. Like I had heard of the verses from the Bible and it kind of just went over my head. But when I saw it there, so every time I think of that, I think of those stones, like the smooth stones just stacked up on each other. And it's cool because then, and this is a testament, wow, we're just preaching.
Yeah.
When I walk around those beaches and I see someone else's stones stacked up, I don't know if they're having a spiritual experience when they're stacking those stones, doing what you and your husband were doing. Right. They could have just been stacking them because it's fun to do with the shape of the rocks.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
If they were having that experience of let's look back at the faithfulness of God, they have left those there. They've walked away. Their lives continue on in a different place. Right. But now here I am, and I get to see those rocks. And now the faithfulness of God to those people is now encouraging me in my faith because I see it. And I don't even know the exact things that God has done, but I see that he has done something.
Right.
And like, is that not what God created community for? Like, we're not meant to live alone. And I need to see you going through difficult things and coming out stronger because that is going to help strengthen my faith so that when you see me going through something hard, that can then strengthen your faith. Like, it all works together.
Right. And I just know it appears the Lord works more in the valleys than on the mountaintops.
I hate that.
Don't we? I don't enjoy the journey. But I also believe we're called to testify about what the Lord's done in our lives. And I know, or at least I don't think we had planned to have a religious conversation. Yeah. And yet how can it not be woven in whatever our work is that we do? Yeah. And yet when we're not in the valley and we're on the mountaintop, it's very easy to forget. Yeah. And I speak for myself of what the Lord has done. So back to the stones. It is a great visual reminder. And then hopefully it is a testimony to others because we all need that encouragement because sometimes, it can when you're on the mountaintop, it looks like you only live on mountains.
Right.
And that's just impossible.
Right.
And so I just believe that that's why we need to provide that hope, that
Yeah.
encouragement. And we can't do it if we're only holding it inside.
Right.
So it's important.
Yeah. And speaking of encouragement, like I feel like you are doing that so much with your life now. So you're
Thank you.
involved with a lot of different things, with dynamic learning connection. You also are an author. You have written incredible books. You have several new books that are coming out soon. I would love for you to share with everyone what it is. What is dynamic learning connection? What is that? And maybe how did you get started with that? I think something really neat about this podcast and even my sister podcast, Queen City Connect, is very much a like, what are you doing right now? But also, I love finding out how people got to that, because so much of what we're doing in our lives today, we either never thought we would do, or maybe we have wanted to do for a long time, but it's not been until recently that we've actually gotten to do the thing. And so it's like, what have those steps been to get you to where you are doing what you're doing with dynamic learning connection and also with being an author and writing books? And I'd love for you to also talk about those books and what they are too, because they're like written for children, and literally Ashley sitting in our networking group telling us about these books, and we're all like women in our 30s, and we're like, yeah, we're going to order these books for us. Like, we need these books. So anyway, share with us a little bit more about you specifically, dynamic learning connection, what that is and how you got into that.
Okay. And by the way, the truth of the matter is I also need my own books.
Great.
Because, we all forget. And that's one of the reasons I wrote them. So for dynamic learning connection, I have a history of being an elementary school teacher. I also taught preschool, and then I taught high schoolers in small group settings for a long time, usually for the high schoolers on the subject of doing hard things. And what does that look like in our life? Because a lot of us don't always want to do hard things, but we are more equipped to do them than we realize. So it's important to point that out on our journey. So
was that in like a subject? Like, how were you talking about this with high schoolers?
So I used to work with youth group children.
Okay.
And that was always the subject that I was brought in to talk about.
I love that. Wow, that's so cool. Okay.
It's all about doing hard things. And it actually was the premise that, in the Jewish culture, you are considered an adult at 13. But we forget that responsibility, and that teenagers are way more capable of doing more than, first of all, regardless of what we believe about them, they're more capable of doing things with the right support when they're reminded that they're capable of doing it. And we ignore that in them.
Yeah.
And obviously many go on to do great things, and many sit there wondering what they should be doing. But anyway, that's a sidebar about doing hard things. So I took some time off. I was a communications director for a company for a while, because that's what I do. I communicate. That's really what teaching is.
Yep.
The ability to communicate information about a subject, to enhance knowledge. And then I had this traumatic event that happened in my life. And as a result of that, in discussing it with a lady, she said to me, have you considered getting back into teaching and educating? I think you'd be really great at this. And I hadn't, because I was trying to, frankly, just survive. Yeah. But at the same time, I was also trying to figure out, my kids were grown. My youngest was in high school, of what did this next stage look like for me. Yeah. And so I went home and I talked about it with my husband, and he said, I think you should do it. You love children. Children are healing. Yeah. Why don't you go for it? And so I did. And so I used my background in education and my specialty in reading to start enhancing reading skills for children. As a result of that, I also have dealt with a lot of ADHD in my family, and just with other hidden disabilities as well, speech disorders. I know it's so prevalent, And I knew based on my prior experience as an educator, my experience as a mom, talking to neighbors, that people just do not understand how neurodivergence affects people, not even just children, adults as well. And so I dove in headfirst and I began to learn and research and read and talk to people and use my own experience to the point that I really kind of became an expert in how this manifests in a lot of different ways in people's lives. So as a result of all of my reading education, I started to get a lot of students that were impacted by ADHD. But as I worked with the students, I found that the parents really knew very little about what's going on neurologically in their child's brain. And there's a lot of stigma attached to neurodivergence, a lot of shame, and a lot of parents that feel shame because they're judged. Just like their child is judged, they too are judged.
Yeah.
And I knew for me, when I traveled that road, the journey felt very lonely. And I mean very lonely. Nobody understood. Family didn't understand. Teachers didn't understand. It just felt very lonely. And in a way, almost embarrassing because I was an educator. So I should have been the expert in my own family. I should have had it all together. And again, I was doing the best I could do.
Right.
But it was still lonely and very misunderstood. And so as I began to work with families, I thought, I don't want anyone to feel the way I felt as a mom. And I don't want any child on this planet to walk around feeling that there's something wrong with them when there is nothing. Of course, I have my own religious beliefs that we're all created in the image of God, and that immediately gives us value. But not everybody sees that. And regardless of whether you have a religious belief or not, I still believe that we are all created with value and that we all matter. And we have got to tap in to that belief in order to make these children, these adults, these families really the best version of themselves that they could be. But a lot of people didn't get it. And so especially with ADHD and how it presents, whether it's an inattentive type or if it's a hyperactive type, they're dismissed or they're considered a problem.
Or like a behavioral issue of like this child just can't obey. And it's like, okay, that could be it. Also, there could be something deeper.
Well, and to explain, maybe they can't obey in this environment, in this situation, but versus just dismissing that, what can we do about it? Because sending them out into the hallway is not changing the behavior.
I spend so much time in the hallway.
Well, you're not, that's not that unusual. And yet at the same time, I was also a classroom teacher. I understand when you have a sea of faces, it's incredibly challenging to deal with 1 or 2 or 5 that are challenging or are struggling. And it's incredibly hard to find the time to investigate why are they struggling. So I get both sides of the coin, and I have great compassion.
Because teachers
for
are
both sides of that.
Teachers are doing the best they can, but they're also managing 20, 30 kids at a time. Parents are doing the best they can, but sometimes they don't have all of the resources and knowledge. And so it just goes to show, like, we need each department. We need everyone doing their job to learn. So what is the structure of dynamic learning connection? Like, how does, for a mom who is listening that is like, oh, I am so intrigued in this conversation, what is the structure of it? How does it work if someone were interested in wanting to learn more about it?
So I went and got all of my life coach certifications because I just wanted to have more credentials combined with my experience. I'm currently finishing my degree in counseling. Not to do anything different than what I already do, But what I find are people call me all the time to say, okay, I hear you do a lot of work with ADHDers. First thing they want to know, do you only work with children? Absolutely not, because ADHD impacts everyone, no matter what age you are. And again, there's misinformation out there. ADHD does not go away. It all takes place in the prefrontal cortex of your brain. So it may appear that the symptoms of it manifest differently as you get older, but you do still technically have it. And so I get a lot of calls about college-age students who maybe were doing okay through high school, and then they get off to college, and you no longer have the family support, the caregiver support, the structure of high school, and they kind of fall off the rails, for lack of a better word, and need some guidance to get back on track.
Sure.
A lot of calls for adults whose children have been diagnosed with ADHD. And now that we know more about it, it makes sense to them. And a lot of them are like, that describes my whole childhood, because there's a hereditary factor in a lot of ADHD as well. And so I get those calls that they're like, okay, well, what can you do for me?
Right.
And so back to dynamic learning connection, I became an expert in teaching executive functioning skills. A lot of people don't know that term. So the simplistic way to say it is a skill that helps us just get done daily what we need to get done. Depending on who you talk to, there some would say there's 8, some would say as many as like 15. I focus on probably around 12 of them.
Okay.
In enhancing children's lives, high schoolers, college age, all the way through my age, of building up, strengthening executive functioning skills. Because again, those skills take place in the prefrontal cortex of our brain. So lots of times with ADHD, there's a deficiency automatically in these skills. But these skills are not just for those that have neurodivergence. We all have to have them.
Right.
And we all have weaknesses in them, and we have places that we excel in them. But definitely there's a higher correlation with those with ADHD. So dynamic learning connection, I come in, we assess, just through talking informally even, a lot of children, even through adults, they can articulate a little bit of where they feel a little bit like they're struggling.
Yeah.
And then obviously with my experience, I can also help steer that conversation. And so we start working on, okay, a lot of people will come to me and say, well, I know I have ADHD, and I know that it takes place in the prefrontal cortex of my brain, and I know I can't focus, or I know I'm kind of hyper, but I don't know what I do with all of that.
Yeah.
And that's, they get to the point of diagnosis, but now how do I live life on Wednesday?
Yeah.
How do I live life in college? How do I live life with at my workplace?
Yeah.
How do I live life in 3rd grade? So I come in and I help build those life skills up to hopefully just make life a little smoother and to build awareness, because we all need self-awareness. That's a major step to understanding who we are, to becoming the best version of who we are.
Yeah. I'm listening to you talk, and I'm just seeing my life flash before my eyes, because I was the child that couldn't focus well in class, and I was the child that got sent out to the halls, and I was the child I did vision therapy for a time, and I did reading comprehension therapy for a time. And I really struggled with so much. And I remember being a kid and feeling like there was something wrong with me. I'm going to get emotional.
Yeah. See, it makes me emotional.
Okay, great.
I hear stories like yours every day.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, the good news is I hear stories like yours every day.
Yes.
You're not alone.
Right.
But at the same time, I totally understand. It's still your story.
Right.
And look at you at your age. I mean, you're still very young, but that same stigma, that shame, that confusion over who am I, or what's wrong with me, or why can that person seem to have it together, or my sibling, or why are my parents always on me? I don't know why I forgot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that we internalize.
Yeah.
And especially for students, they don't know how to voice it because there's embarrassment in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And here I am, 32 now, and I struggle every day with the executive functioning skills of my day.
The things.
And the things of what do I need to do? I know I need to get this done.
Yeah.
I don't feel like getting it done. And so I feel like for me, it wasn't until a few years ago that I was hearing more and more about ADHD. And then it was something I was like, oh, I think I have that, because it was like all of the issues and things that I struggled with as a child. I mean, people cared about me and loved me, and my parents did everything they could to try to help me. But I also think it was like trying to heal the symptoms without getting to the root is how it felt for me.
Right.
And so now it's like, for me, it was like, oh, if you have ADHD, okay, well then you just need to go get medicated. You just need to go get on this medication. Right. And that seemed to be the only way to solve it.
Right.
And I'm not outing the medications. Like, I am on a medication and it does help me. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should have been on this sooner. Like, I've seen it drastically help my improvement with just getting things done. Yeah. Which I'm like, dang, this is how people like normally are. This is nice. Okay, great. Love that for everyone else.
Now it all makes sense.
Now it all makes sense. But also, like, I don't know. I'm thinking of like these kids now that are struggling, and like for you to be able to step in to be like, okay, how can I help you navigate and learn these skills so that you're not 32 and figuring this out for the first time, you know? And I don't think I'm figuring out for the first time, but also it is still a daily struggle for me of like, yes, I love what I get to do, and I love all the different things that I get to do. And I think that it is, I think that ADHD and all these things are also just gifts from the Lord of, obviously we live in a broken world where everyone is messed up in some way. We're not perfect, but God is a very redemptive God. And so you look at all of these super creative, genius people, and most of them are people that struggle with executive functioning skills and have ADHD and, you know, and like, but they're the more creative people. And so it's just, it is cool to see that you can use it to be your superpower.
Yes.
But it takes acknowledging where you are. It also takes somebody looking at you and being like, there is no shame in this. You're not weird. Right. You're not alone. And
you're also not dumb.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of kids don't like to use a word like that, but other kids will use a word like that with them.
Yeah.
That ADHD has nothing to do with intelligence. But it's also often misunderstood that some people with it are less intelligent because maybe they don't turn in their assignments or they don't pay attention, all kinds of things. But it has nothing to do with intelligence.
Yeah.
But even like what you're saying about, you know, at your age, that it's still, you know, you still struggle with it daily. That's my point. Yeah. It doesn't go away. And it definitely, you know, you can go to a lot of conferences and they'll all say, ADHD is my superpower. It does not feel like your superpower if it is not managed.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's where I step in. That, yes, there's so many gifts that come along with it. The ability, this energy funneled in a proper way is a fabulous component for those that have the hyperactive component of ADHD. Right. But if that's not managed properly, it is not a superpower at all. Not for your parents, not for your job situation, not for your teacher.
It's like not. If everyone's life is a puzzle, it feels as though my pieces are all jumbled up. But it's like we need to find someone who can help us. Like, the pieces are there.
Right.
So what do we need to do to put these pieces together? Like you're saying, like we just need to funnel the energy in a proper way. And once we do that, holy cow, I can
Right.
get so much done. I am the
Right.
most productive person. I am on task when I feel like have that motivation and the mission of doing something. So it's like, how do we put these puzzle pieces together to then like have maximum effort?
Right. And that's where I step in.
And that's you.
And
You're like,
yes,
all right, here, let's get all the
exactly.
corner pieces. All right.
Exactly. And I get this question a lot of, so Ashley, like, what's your program?
Yeah.
I don't have a program.
Okay.
Because what you need and what someone else that calls me, what they need may be very different. Now, are there generalities? Of course there are. I just said there's all of these
Right.
executive functioning skills. But I don't need to start with the first one with you if you're already doing great with that.
Yeah.
And that's not really your issue.
I feel like that just shows so much excellence and wisdom on your standpoint too,
Right.
because I feel like there could be other programs out there that are genuinely trying to do the best that they can, but it's, you almost get put into a system.
Right.
Whereas you're like, no, like, let's sit down and talk about you and where you're at,
Right.
what you're excelling in,
Right.
what you need help in.
Right. Now, again, like in group classes, group sessions, we can hit generalities
Yeah.
that are a great umbrella for a lot of situations. But we can also dive to the heart of the matter in helping you
Right.
to understand you better.
It's so good.
And that's really important.
Yep.
Because, again, you brought up medicine. I'm not a medical doctor. The medical component of ADHD needs to stay in that field. And I believe strongly that anyone else that's giving advice on that is a little bit out of line and it's just not responsible.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a medical component that should be discussed with medical professionals.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of research now and studies that show medicine is not just a magic pill.
Right.
You don't just give your child a pill. Your college student doesn't just take a pill. Your grown adult doesn't just take a pill and think, oh, there we go. I'm perfect now.
Right.
This is great.
Because I remember when I first started feeling like, oh, okay, I'm like super motivated to be productive and get things done.
Right.
That doesn't mean that I'm all of a sudden going to be like, okay, well, let's go find all the things that I needed to get done for work today.
Yeah.
No, I learned how to play golf.
Yeah.
I learned how to solve a Rubik's Cube in under 3 minutes.
That's
All
impressive.
things I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
I am very,
As
but
you
it's
should
like,
be.
you still have to learn
Right.
how to then use that to do what needs to be done.
Right. And so there's a lot of studies now that show that medicine, if that's the route that people choose, and plenty choose not to, but if it is,
Yeah.
adding in coaching
Yes.
really is beneficial. On the
Yeah.
other hand, it can't just be any kind of coaching. And there are a lot of people out there that are like, oh, yeah, that seems popular. I'll do ADHD coaching. There's a big difference when you really understand
Yeah.
the components of it. And so I said already, I've sat on both sides of the table.
Right.
I've sat in the school meetings as the teacher. I've sat in the school meetings as the parent. And at this point, I have a lot of experience
Yeah.
of just grasping how this manifests itself
Right.
as a spectrum.
Yep.
And so, it's easy to give advice and be like, oh, well, Morgan, just write it down in your planner. Well, that sounds great.
Yeah. There's a lot of things written down in my planner right now.
Exactly. And granted, writing it down in your planner is probably better than not writing it down in
Right.
your planner. But do we write it down in colors? Is there a way that we color code it? Maybe a planner is not great for you. Maybe you're more technologically driven and we need to be looking more at Google Calendar. But wait a second, how are we going to remember where your planner is or your computer? Oh, wait, there's other layers there.
Yeah.
And then now I know where my computer is. I know where my planner is. How am I going to remember that I need to actually look in it?
Yeah.
And then when I look in it, how am I going to prioritize which component that I need to get done today? What needs to be done first?
Right.
And how do there are just
It's so
many
layered.
layers.
Yeah.
And that's just one little example. So to say, well, write it down in your planner, high schooler's just going to go,
Yeah. What do I do with that?
yeah. And by the way, what if your teacher's yelling as the bell's ringing and you're switching classes and you didn't get a chance to?
Oh,
Happens all the time.
yeah, I've been there.
So what's going to be how are we going to scaffold our learning
Yep.
and our strategies
Yeah.
to really be productive?
Right.
I also tell people all the time, I'm not just teaching these skills for the 4th grader or the 8th grader or the freshman in college. These skills are scaffolded. Yeah. They matter forever. What you learn of how to manage your ADHD or manage executive functioning skills or implement them as a 5th grader comes out to play again when you're a mom or a dad and you're trying to get your child to soccer practice with all the stuff. Yeah. Or you need to pack the school lunch. Right. It doesn't just stop. Or when you have a manager that wants, a project completed, learning these skills as early as possible or becoming aware of them, even if you didn't learn them at a young age, impacts every aspect of our life pretty much forever. Right. And so I find what I do, what I want people to experience is really important. Because again, I don't want them sitting here at, 30 plus years old with tears in their eyes, with those memories triggered of those internal feelings of lack of self-worth, of confusion, of pain. It just doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. And I want parents to know that. I want to help train them that this is what's going on with your child. Yeah. And I really believe that most of us want to do better. Yeah. Yeah. We really do. And so how do we give those skills to any age to make that happen? Right. It just matters. Yeah.
That's so good. For the record, as technological as I am, I will always be a paper planner person. Yeah. And you know what? As you were talking, I was thinking in real time, and then we're going to jump into your books because we need to talk about those. I was thinking in real time, one skill that was instilled in me from a very young age, probably 3rd grade, young elementary, we were given paper planners and we were had to write our assignments in them. I remember every morning we'd come in, write our assignments on the board for our homework for the next day. And that is something that I then took to college. And when you're in college, you can do whatever you want. But I was like, I need my paper planner because this is what I had in high school. Why would I change it up now? Right. I'm in a different environment. I need everything that feels familiar to me. Right. And now, still today, I have my paper planner. That is what I use. And it needs to have the months looking the certain way and the days looking the certain way. Yeah. And the only reason I get done what I do get done, which could be more, but the reason I'm getting done what I get done is because of that paper planner. But that was instilled in me when I was 8, 9 years old. Right. And so that's just so cool to see. But for someone who'd never had that, to then just be like, oh, well, just go buy a planner, write it down. I can see why that would be confusing, and I've never done that before.
Well, also with the ADHD is lots of times an issue with motivation. Mm-hmm. So how do we motivate someone to make a change in behavior? Yeah. You have to find value in it. Right. We all do. Yeah. If you want to lose weight, we have to find value in what it will look like to give up maybe the dessert or to change our eating habits. Right. That's what motivates us. Yeah. It's the same thing with ADHD. So it can't just be a planner. It's a task initiation. Yeah. All right, I can see it all on my planner now that I remember where it is. I remember what it wrote down. Now, how do I get started? Because this looks really boring to me. Yeah. And the rest of life looks way more interesting. Right. I don't want to do this. Yep. So how do I get by or get around task avoidance? Yeah. That is an executive functioning
That's
skill.
Fascinating. I've thought of that, but I've never thought of that being one of those skills. Because for me, I'm a very positive reinforcement person. So for me, when I sit down, it's like, okay, I have 4 things I need to do. And when I get them done, I'm going to go watch an episode of this show that I'm loving on Netflix. But I'm not watching that until I get this done. And
it's actually a great strategy because it gives you that dopamine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again, we could talk about this forever because that's also a short-term goal. Okay. And a lot of ADHDers struggle with long-term goals. Right. So if you're saying, well, but don't you want to get into college one day? Well, yeah, but that's
trying to get through Tuesday.
Yeah, that's not going to help me today. Okay. I can't make that connection.
Right. What we need to do, Ashley, I need to have everyone listen to this episode and then send in questions and stuff. And then
That
I need
would
to
be
have you
so
back
fun.
on,
That would
and
be
then we'll
so
talk
fun.
through like specific like case scenarios and stuff,
Yeah.
because I just feel like
That
this can
would be
go
so fun.
so many different ways.
Because
Wow.
we've got to raise awareness.
Yeah.
Self-awareness, and then just
Yeah.
population awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we deserve more compassion to give to ourselves and from others.
Okay, so share with us the books that you've written. What are they? What are the skills that they're covering? And then also obviously share with us how we can purchase and when and everything, because they're not out yet, but they're coming out.
That's true.
Ooh, I'm so excited.
They come out in the fall.
Okay.
Actually, you can purchase them through. I actually started my own publishing company, so it's called Dynamic Learning Press. You can find all of this information through dynamiclearningconnection.com.
Awesome.
But they
I'll also
will come
link
out
everything in the
late
show
summer.
notes.
Yeah, late summer, early fall.
Perfect.
I have 6 that are coming out.
Okay.
That was never my intention. Writing books I thought was a little bit easier than it actually is. Come to find out, there are a lot of details involved in it that take a lot of time. And so I assume that most people do not do so many at one time, but it's just the way it's worked out.
Sure.
So the first one that I have coming out is called Lizzie and a Tizzy. And it is written, I never use the words ADHD in the book, but the premise of it is that there's a character that struggles in school and she doesn't really understand why, because it appears to be so easy for other people. And a new teacher comes into her life and explains to her that you actually have gifts and talents as well. We all do. And the back of the book, because it's really important to me, I want my literature that I write to be a vehicle for people to start conversations. You know, because of my experience as a reading teacher, I have had the joy and privilege of working with children, in a lot of cases one-on-one. And it's amazing the kinds of conversations that they tell me or that we talk about as we look at characters and character development and, you know, putting ourselves in other characters' shoes, that sort of thing. So I hope that these books will start conversations when kids don't always have a voice for it, or parents don't even realize it's a conversation to be had.
Right.
So in the back of that book, I have suggestions for helping a child with focus.
Okay.
Diagnosed ADHD, undiagnosed, just being a child. So I want to include those helpful tips. I have another book coming out called The Boat. And it's based off a story that I have told my children. My children are all in their 20s, grown professionals, minus my son who's still in college. And it's all about friendship. And it's written metaphorically as that we all have our own boats. And who we allow to get in our boat needs to be paddling in the same direction towards the same goals that we are. Not to be identical to us, but being a positive friend in that regard. Also, we bear responsibility when we get into other people's boats to help steer them in a positive direction. And then to be very aware that when we allow people into our boats, again, metaphorically, if they begin to drill holes in our boats, they do not belong in our boat and they need to get out. And so at the back of that book, I've put in tips of what really makes a genuine, authentic friend.
Wow.
Because I think we tell people, I'm huge about talking out loud with children, with teenagers. I think we assume that they know more than they do sometimes. Like we'll say, well, you just need to be a good friend, or well, you need to pick better friends. But we never really get into the details of
what makes a friend good.
Yeah, what that's kind of abstract if you think about it.
Yeah.
So I'm huge into talking out loud about that. Another book I have coming called And the Mirror. It's all about how we look in mirrors every day in our life, and what is reflected back is just not always accurate. And what does that look like in our life to raise self-awareness of being who we really are and not focusing on other people's mirrors, but how to be the best version of ourselves. So that one is about, self-worth, and there's so many mental health issues with children and youth today.
Yeah.
And I think, again, these are important conversations to have. Another one is called The Voice in My Head. And it came to me bizarrely so, a little bit like a rap in my head.
I love that so much.
And the refrain in this book that is kind of like this rap continues throughout the book. But I had that in my head before I actually wrote the rest of the lines to it. And it's all about how we all have voices that pop into our head that tell us we're not worthy, we're not capable, we shouldn't try this. And yet we really need to be aware of that voice. We need to speak back to that voice of that's not true.
Yeah.
And it needs to be a conscious awareness. Now, if people could memorize it as a rap, it would be amazing. Just like when we memorized songs, could we do that?
Yeah, 100%.
Because, we memorize things as children that we still remember when we're 40.
Yep.
And that's a good reminder to be like, no, wait, that's a negative thought. It's not true. I'm going to speak back to that because I know who I am.
Yep.
Such an important reminder for all of us.
So good.
To the point that my oldest daughter, she lives in New York City, took a huge test a few weeks ago and for her job in finance. And she was telling me the few days before, like, I'm so anxious. I can't, like, I'm so nervous about this. And we started saying, but what's the voice in your head saying? You are capable of this. You have prepared for this. And she was like, I need that book. And I was like, it's not here yet, but we can still know.
Yes.
You know what it is. Another book that I've written is called Eddie's New Skills. I throw around the term executive functioning skills all the time. I find a lot of people don't really know what those are. So I've written a story about Eddie, who really wants to be well-behaved. He wants to do well in school, but he just doesn't quite have the skills to do that. And so it's all about executive functioning skills. And I've listed the ones that I think are the most important in there to point those out to Eddie, as well as examples of how you would actually implement this in your life.
Yep.
So it's a fiction book, but has a lot of nonfiction content in it as well, because I think it's just a great way to really teach any of us, how impactful strengthening these skills can be. And so I'm like, did I do all 6 of them?
I think that was 5.
That was 5. Okay. Now I've got to think, which one did I leave off?
Come back for the bonus feature of the podcast.
I know. I'm like, okay, which one did I leave off? All right, hold on one second.
I mean, you shared 5 with us, which is more than we need.
Okay. All right. It'll come to me in a minute.
The 6th one is a surprise. It'll come to you.
Surprise. Yeah.
I can't wait. So those are coming out late summer, early fall. When they do come out, where can people purchase those? Do you know?
Right now, I'm in the process of
figuring all that out.
All of that
Okay,
out,
great.
So
we'll keep everyone posted on socials and everything where they can do that and pre-order and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
great.
Exactly.
And you're also on Instagram at Dynamic Learning Connection.
Yes.
So everyone needs to go follow you there because you post great content and videos there as well.
I hope so. Again, what I do is just so important to me to raise awareness for families, for the people, all people that are impacted by ADHD, for teachers that, maybe like went through the university like I did where we didn't talk about any of this.
Yep.
And I am absolutely convinced as an older person that to be successful, no matter how we qualify what success means, we've got to be strong readers with great comprehension.
Okay.
And we've got to have strong executive functioning skills, no matter what path we take.
Yeah.
And I'm in that business.
And everyone listening, lucky for you, we have someone who is an expert in that. So I really do hope that people reach out and even just thank you for being on this episode. I feel like you've brought so much attention to the topic, also just encouragement for everyone going through this and knowledge. So if you're listening and this is resonating with you, please reach out to Ashley and you will point them in whatever direction I'm sure that they need to go.
Absolutely.
So, okay, well, I would love to have you come back sometime and like
Thank
keep
you.
this conversation going. So I'm so serious. If people are listening and you have continuous like questions about this and want us to keep chatting, let us know, because
I would love to answer
I would
them.
love to keep this conversation going.
Yeah. I just don't want people to be floundering around.
Yeah.
I don't want them to feel
We don't
lonely.
have time for that.
And we can do something about it. There is hope out there.
Yeah.
And I'm here to provide it.
It is such a beautiful message of hope. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
You're going to be great, because the show's called Love That For You. What are you loving right now? It's late April, early May, 2024. What's Ashley loving?
I currently am loving outdoor dining. And I
Great
can't
answer.
say that I'm only loving it right now, but I'm an outside girl.
Okay.
And I feel better when I'm outside. I feel suffocated although obviously I work inside and I have an office, but I'm an outside girl. And so anytime I can be outside makes me really happy. So
is there a place in Charlotte that you have been outdoor dining that you can tell us about?
Oh, goodness. Okay. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble with this. My husband has a history in the restaurant business, you know. You can find me up in South End, in that area of town most weekends. I'm also a people person, so I like to be surrounded by just being outside, and I love people watching and all of that. Or should I really say, like, one of my new favorite outdoor dining places is Coquette in Uptown Charlotte.
I've heard of this, but I've not been.
Yes. So beautiful, beautiful restaurant on the end side.
I'm
a city girl also. And so I just love, I love to travel. That's just my favorite thing to do, eat and travel. And so I can kind of be on their patio and feel like I'm in France or somewhere like that.
Yes.
So that's one of my places I'm
loving. And you said that's in Uptown?
It's in Uptown.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Everyone add it to your list. I've not been there.
Got to go.
Yes, I will add it to my list.
Yeah.
This has been so good.
Yeah, it's so great. But again, there are a lot of places that I love, and I love supporting restaurants.
Yeah.
Probably too much.
Have you been to La Belle Helene?
I have not actually eaten in La Belle Helene, but I walk past it all the time.
That's probably one of my favorite restaurants in Charlotte.
Okay. Yeah. It's on my list. My husband goes. He works near there. So, I keep a running list of restaurants to try.
Yeah.
All the time.
Okay.
And
well,
we
as
try
you
a
go
lot.
places, text me and be like, Morgan, this place was great. You got to go.
Yeah. Okay.
I love adding places to my list too.
Have a lot. A lot. So probably eat out way too much, but
no.
Again, can't help it.
Living life.
I love it. That's right. Making the most of it.
Ashley, thank you so much
for having me.
Coming here and sharing so much. Like I just know that this episode is going to be such a help. And even if someone's listening and thinking like, I wish so-and-so could hear this, please pass this along to them. Like, let's just keep this episode flowing. Like, this is a message for everybody of hope, of help, of healing, of awareness.
Got to understand.
Well, you're so kind to take time out of your busy day to come chat with us. So
thanks for having me.
I'm glad we're friends.
This was fun. I'm glad we're friends too.
Thanks for listening to this episode, friends. If you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the love with your friends and family. Remember, life is all about the stories we create and share, so let's keep spreading inspiration and positivity. See you next week.